But when you look at interest volume, or now what we call the TIP, the total interest percentage, okay, which was a long time in coming, but on the new CDs, or what they call the closing disclosure worksheet, it shows that number very clearly. But it's amazing, CJ, how many people completely glance over that because respectfully, the person selling you that loan, and again, I'm not vilifying them, I'm just being honest, isn't going to spend a lot of time having you focus in on that number because that number is not going to be the 3, 4, 5. Did we lose our recording there? It's not going to be the 3, 4, 5, 6% note rate. It's probably going to be 60, 80, 85, 90% volume or percentage of money that you're borrowing. So when you refinance, there's advantages that can occur, but there's 3 negative things. Most of the time, people re-extend the term. Now, do they have to? No. That's what a loan officer is going to tell you. Oh, you have 23 years left. You want to redo it at 23 years? Great. But 9 out of 10 times, that's not what happens. Number 2, yes, you could, in fact, pay the cost involved in refinancing out of your pocket, but 9.5 out of 10 people do not, right? And no matter what you do, you are going to reset the schedule on that amortization term back to 0. So let's give you a perfect example. Right now, rates are higher, admittedly, than they were 2-3 years ago. Historically, 6, 7, 8% is still historically very low if you want to look over the last 40 years. But relative to what we all got spoiled with, CJ, for the last 2, 3, 4 years, over the last year and a half, 2 years, they're much higher, okay? But when rates were dropping, and somebody, let's just say they had a 5 or a 6% rate, and they refinanced down to 3. Have you ever stopped and asked yourself why in the world the bank would possibly have a vested financial interest in wanting you to cut your interest rate down in half? How would that possibly be to their benefit? So let's pause that for a second. If you've got a 6% rate and I come to you and say, hey, I'm going to give you 3. Now, I'm not talking about the person facilitating the loan. I'm talking about the financial organizations that are backing these loans, that are creating these loans. Why would it be to my advantage to get you to pay less interest? Because you're not, right? Because in most of those cases, I've extended your term, I've increased the amount of indebtedness, and I've reset the clock back to 0, which means you could have taken your rate, went from 6% to 3, again, for argument's sake, but the amount of interest volume or the percentage of each payment, principal and interest payment that's actually going to principal versus interest went down. The amount of interest or the amount of interest volume went up. Well, you're thinking, how does that make any sense? That's how the game is played. So again, is there a place to refinance? Absolutely, positively. But I will tell you that unless you're actually going to put that money to work that you saved, actively put it to work, then there's 3 bad things that happen, and they're all going to happen. Now, if you take that $400 or $600, $800 a month that you saved with a lower note rate and all the things we talked about, and you deploy that money, and I don't mean haphazardly, CJ. I don't mean randomly here and there. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll pay biweekly payments. Maybe I'll pay extra money to principal here and there. Well, we know the percentages tell us that life doesn't work that way because the road to hell is paved in good intentions. So it's all a matter, I want to do this, that, or the other, but people don't follow through. It's why we talk about this at every seminar. CJ, what are the top 2 New Year's resolutions each and every year?
Fitness and finance.
Correct. Lose weight, get in shape, get out of debt, save money. And why are they the same 2 every single year?
Because people fail.
Yeah, it's important priority, and they fail. And it's not just the people don't, plan to fail, they fail to plan. They also fail to follow through. And it's not just lack of discipline. That's part of it. It's not just lack of structural accountability. It is because we don't understand the relationship between what we're about to do and the impact it's going to have next week, next month, 5, 10 years from now. So if I ask you today, CJ, tell me exactly how many calories you took in today. You have absolutely no idea. And by the way, how many calories did you burn? You have absolutely no idea. No. But yet you do know that if you eat less and exercise more, you'll lose weight. But knowing doesn't matter, does it? Because we don't understand the relationship between what we just did today, this morning, this afternoon, or tonight. So both the things that it takes are moving, correct?
Right.
What else works that way? Our budget. We know if we spend less and save more, we'll be out of debt and have money in the bank. So why is 68% of the population in debt And why is debt an all-time high? Why are we at nearly $2 trillion in consumer debt? Why is that happening? It's not because people think paying interest is a good thing. It's not because they don't want to be debt free. It's because the two primary things that a budget depends upon is what? Spend less, save more. Okay, easy. That's that simple, but it's not that easy because guess what? Incomes change all the time, don't they? And not just for self-employed people. You could get laid off. You could get a raise. You could get a bonus. You could get a commission check. You could get a tax refund. And guess what else happens? It's not just inflation. Expenses change all the time, especially with a family. One kid's better and the other one breaks his leg. One gets braces and the other one needs something else. One's joining some travel team here. The windows need to be replaced and then it's the roof and then the transmission. Life isn't going to stop lifing. So guess what? Those two things are always moving. So how important is it for us to have a strategic, trackable approach to ensure that we understand the impact? So that's why I say that if somebody's going to refinance and they don't actually deploy a solution like we offer with the financial GPS, they're very, very likely to fail and not maximize the very benefit of what they're doing. They just created short-term relief of pressure and a little bit more comfort, but long-term, they've only kicked the can further down the road and create a greater likelihood that they're going to have debt longer and be a prisoner to that debt longer. So it's all a matter of saying, how do we strategically deploy those dollars that we've saved systematically and efficiently to create a better final outcome?
Those words, strategically deploy, they stick out in my mind. Strategically deploy, because this is how people are getting their debts eliminated very quickly. So if you wanted to mention a little bit about what you mean with strategically deploy, are you talking about financial allocation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. In fact, I would say there's four primary things that our system is designed. Well, there's 7 or 8, but there's 4 primary ones, right? Strategic payoff. And by that, I mean not knowing just what to pay, right? And when to pay it, or even how much to pay. It's knowing to the penny, to the day, to the debt, exactly which debt to pay off, how much and when, and in what order. Now, if you understand factorial math, right? People think, well, if I've got one debt, I've got one variable. If I have 2 debts, by the way, my debt, it just isn't one more option. I've just increased that factor by 100, right? By 100%. I've doubled it. Now, if you have 4 debts, it didn't just grow up 4 times. It's exponential, right? So it's the difference between addition, subtraction, and multiplication. 5 plus 5 is 10. 5 squared is not 10. So you understand how many different factorial scenarios there are, because every debt isn't due on the same day. And you don't make the same amount of money on the same days every day. So if you made X amount of dollars and you got paid on the first of every month, and every debt you had was due on the first, and neither of those things changed, well, that'd be pretty simple. But life doesn't work that way, does it? People get paid weekly, or they get paid once a month, or they get paid bi-weekly, or the income varies. And expenses, not every debt you have is due on the same day for the same dollar amount from the same vendor. So how in the world do you determine with specificity, with, I hate to use the fancy word, but algorithmic mathematical perfection, how do you actually know how to leverage every dollar you have every day you have it until you spend it? Remember, our goal is not to bash the banks or the financial institutions. It's how do we replicate them? There's variations of this expression, but imitation, if you will, is the greatest form of flattery in essence. So it's a matter of how do we replicate what's been working? There's nobody that denies that banks and financial institutions as a whole are the single biggest building in any city and any state and any country in the world, hands down. Why is that?
Right.
We've joked about this in the past. It's the golden rule, and it is not the one you learned in church. It is he who has the gold makes the rules. Possession is 9/10. So they both have the money, they know what to do with it, and they actively deploy it to either eliminate interest or to earn interest. It's one of the two or both simultaneously. Our whole goal is, how do we help the average person bank like a bank? And not as a catchphrase, not as a concept, not as an idea. Literally in practice, how do they execute decisions the way a bank would? Knowing exactly which debt to pay, how much and when, to minimize interest costs, to maximize reduction of principal, and to do so consistently, scalably, and sustainably. And then ultimately now, how do they leverage the use of that money or any portion of it left every day until you spend it? So it's really understanding, again, we've talked about this before, getting out of loanership of your money and getting into ownership of your money. Possessions 9/10. How do you leverage that money? So our goal is, how do we let the average person bank like a bank at the push of a button? And that's exactly what our system is able to do. That's why we call it financial GPS. GPS does something more extraordinary than a map. It's live, it's dynamic, it recalculates every time things change. And that doesn't just apply to driving to the grocery store, that applies to life. So what kind of financial GPS? Not a spreadsheet, not some digital calculator, something that in real time actually begins to predict the impact of what you're about to do or that you just did. We all know what we've already done. We can look back, right? But it's a matter of, what's the impact of what I'm thinking of doing or that I just did yesterday on my entire financial picture a month from now, a year from now, 5, 10 years from now. When you start having that kind of financial foresight, you start looking at the entire world differently. You start looking at what things are really costing you, not just what they appear to be. Remember, banks want you to focus on payment or interest rate, but sometimes it's not interest volume or the effective interest rate, it's the note rate. Remember what magicians do. Look at my hand here because I don't want you to see what I'm doing down here. It's sleight of hand. And it happens all the time, every day. And respectfully, the financial industry is better at than anybody, because it's all about saying, we want you to focus on interest rate when that serves us, when it's not really reflection of the actual interest cost or volume or that effective interest rate to you and your family. And then the same thing applies. Well, it's not really $8,000 or $26,000. It's only $175 a month. So the system kind of helps reveal, here's the true cost of that decision, even if you paid cash, because now here's the foregone opportunity you gained from having dedicated it to eliminate debt. So it's all a matter of being able to create more specific and efficient navigational guidance on your whole financial picture, and not just next week, next month, but next year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Because as we know, life isn't going to stop lifing, right? It's not like, oh, when I get the car fixed and when I get a new refrigerator, I'm never going to have another problem again. Well, get ready, because it's going to happen next Thursday when you least expect it. And how do we adapt to that, right? That is the main function here. How do we not only build those algorithms, those proven systems and strategies into the system, but how do we have that dashboard, that financial guidance like we get with GPS to say, oh, you just missed your turn. That means you are now turn right in 200 feet. Oh, you missed it? No problem. Recalculate. But now you added 1.6 miles and 3.2 minutes to your destination. Now you can plan according to that. Hey, you text that person, I'm going to be 5 minutes late. Where is that in our financial picture? How do people navigate future decisions when they don't even understand the impact of what they just did or what they're about to do? So that's why these particular disciplines and these concepts are so incredibly important to deploy, again, strategically, consistently, and with continuity down the road.